all of those who are new, IWP is the independent graduate school of national security, intelligence, and international affairs. We offer doctoral and PhD programs, 8 master's degree intelligence programs, including 2 online MAs, and 18 certificates of graduate study. If you are interested in learning more about us, please visit us online at iwp.edu. We'd like to thank all of our supporters who make our IWP events program possible. To support the work of IWP, please visit iwp.edu/donate. And before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that if you have a question, please use the Q&A function located at the top of the screen rather than the raise hand function. Once again, it's the icon at the top that says Q&A located at the top left of the Teams window. Today we will be hearing from Ambassador David J. Smith in a lecture titled Russian Information and Cyber Warfare Threats, What We Know from the Russian Attack on Ukraine. Ambassador David J. Smith is a foreign policy professional with over 40 years of experience spanning the U.S. military, Pentagon, State Department, Congress, diplomatic delegations, defense industry, research institutes, and democratic development initiatives. His expertise includes NATO, the former Soviet Union, the Caucasus, and the Black Sea regions, arms control, as well as missile defense and cybersecurity policy. A former U.S. Air Force officer and professor of cybersecurity policy at Utica College, Ambassador Smith has served as the U.S. Chief Negotiator at the U.S.-Soviet Defense and Space Talks, a Senior Fellow at the Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies, and founder of the Georgian Security Analysis Center. His work in Georgia from 2002 to 2014 placed him at the forefront of studying the first combined kinetic and cyber war during Russia's 2008 attack on Georgia. Ambassador Smith has delivered his updated presentation, Russian Cyber Capabilities, Policy, and Practice, to audiences around the world since 2010. With that, please welcome me in welcoming Ambassador David J. Smith. If anyone has a question, please use the Q&A function, and we will get to it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great, Lana, thank you very much for that introduction. And just to say a few words, I'd like to thank Wayne Schroeder and Tim McCranner at the Institute of World Politics they were really the initiators of this contact, this opportunity for me to present to you. I'd like to thank Shannon Tryon for all her work putting this thing together. And I'd like to thank all of you who are sharing a little bit of your late afternoon with me to listen to this. So I hope you find it interesting. A little bit of history about this presentation. Started working on this back in 2008 in what appears to have been the first combined kinetic and cyber war when Russia attacked Georgia. Been working on it ever since. This has been constantly updated, and this is now kind of 2 presentations. It's some basics about Russian information and cyber warfare, and what we know about the Russian attack on Ukraine. So it's kind of 2 things put together. That obviously means that the first part has to be a little abbreviated, but I will start with a little bit of history. So let's talk a little bit about some historical background. The Russians have thought a lot about this stuff. They've been thinking about it since the 1980s. I can trace it back to the Marshal of the Soviet Union, Nikolai Bulgakov. You see him there in the lower left, a brilliant military thinker, was thinking about the idea of information becoming part of warfare, first seen as just sort of a support function and eventually becoming a real capability of its own. He compared it to the introduction of nuclear weapons, where at first it was thought to be just large artillery, something extra, and eventually became pivotal to warfighting doctrine. And that was kind of continued. They thought a lot about it. They've written a lot about it. They were very, very interested in the Gulf War. 1991, said it was the first technical operation, studied it very, very much. Then in the Yeltsin years, they didn't have any money. So what did they do? They spent a lot of time, rather than writing software and building machines and trying things out, they wrote a lot of theory. So there's a lot of doctrine. There's a lot of theory. There's a lot of thinking that's gone into this. Well, then there was kind of a shock. 94 96 and 99 to 2000, the Chechen wars. The Chechens got out ahead of them completely on information theory, really beat them with the world press. And so they learned a lot. So they put a lot of thought into this. After that, Putin said never again. A few years later, we go into Georgia. I won't go into the whole history of the Russian attack on Georgia. There you see, though, we have the beginnings of a combined kinetic war and kinetic and cyber war. Take a look at those pictures I have there. Clearly, I want you to notice two things. One, the lady at the bottom, I actually met her several days after the attack. That looks awfully familiar for those of us watching our TV screens of what's going on in Ukraine right now. That was Georgia in 2008. If I didn't tell you that, you might assume it was something, a scene from yesterday in Ukraine. This is what they do. This is how they fight wars. Civilian apartment buildings, hospitals, schools, whatever. The other thing I'd like you to take a look at on this slide is that middle part there in the green. It's hard to see, but if you see, I have in red on the left-hand side there, well-organized hacktivism. Sort of basically crowdsourcing this capability out. What you see there is a list. This was on a website called stopgeorgia.ru. And it basically had some basic instructions on how to do a simple DDoS attack on a target. And it had a list of 30 some targets there. You see there that had just about every Georgian government agency, some major banks, the American embassy, the British embassy. And so we're going to see this coming out again as we take a look at Ukraine. Kind of irregular from a Western way of looking at things. Well, when we started trying to figure out, well, who's doing this? I mean, it's obviously has something to do with the war between Russia and Georgia. It keeps resolving back to some strange places: criminals, kids, criminals. You see on the left there the headquarters of the Russian business network on the outskirts of St. Petersburg. A lot of script kiddies, a lot of kids. You see the Nashi kids there on the right side of the screen. It kind of confounds the Western way of looking at things. We're expecting things to be approved by a government and everything done in a certain way, and it's hard to believe that this is the way this is doing. Well, that's how it goes in Russia. It's basically contracted out. We'll talk in a moment about some of the governmental level players, but this is something we have to start getting used to, the idea of basically irregulars carrying out part of the cyber mission. Okay, so who are the players? Go back to the upper left-hand side of the screen, the KGB, back in the old Soviet Union. Gorbachev, in the waning years of the Soviet Union, pulls the information warfare, the electronic functions out of the KGB, creates an organization called FOPSI. Don't waste too much time on FOPSI. As soon as Putin came to office, he abolished FOPSI and took all those functions, put a lot of them right back in the FSB, the successor of the KGB. They also went to the GRU, the main intelligence directorate, basically military intelligence. And at that time, the first main directorate of the KGB was split off and it became the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service. So some of those functions went there. You see some minor roles for the Federal Protection Service and the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but then the names you always see in the newspapers. You just can't talk about Russian cyber capabilities without talking about these other groups. And there's kind of a variety. Are they part of the intelligence bureaucracy? Are they separate? Are they we used to see in the papers criminal hacker groups? They're much more integrated into the Russian system than that. So you see associated with the GRU, Sandworm, Fancy Bear, associated with the FSB, Cozy Bear, Dragonfly. These are your governmental level players. Now, it gets confusing if you don't follow this stuff every day, or frankly, even if you do. The different names, I just put this somewhat in jest, but There's so many different names for these groups, so I've kind of created this bear directory. You see, for example, Fancy Bear. Also, you'll see it written up as APT-28, Sofa Sea, Pawn Storm, Strontium, Grizzly Steppe, Forest Blizzard. The reason is the government, various governments looking at this, the American government, the British government, other allied governments, and a lot of the cybersecurity research companies that look at this stuff, they give it their own name. So you'll see a press release that says APT-28 did something, then you'll see something else about Fancy Bear. So you have to kind of put it together. Just a word to the wise. This is out there. It can be a little confusing. So don't assume these are all different groups. Then there's this other this coterie of groups. I said a broad dynamic array of fellow travelers. They are groups with varying abilities, varying tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, different affiliations. That is, they're different affiliations with different parts of the Russian government. They play different roles. Some of them are very sophisticated. Some of them, frankly, are not very sophisticated. They come, they go, they mutate. Probably people are moving between one group and another. But these are out there too, and they're part of the landscape of the Russian capability, and we're seeing that in the attacks on Ukraine. And then let's not forget there's external help from hacker groups in places like North Korea, Belarus. Those are out there too, and we have to take those into account. The other thing I'd like to call your attention to in this Russian cyber capabilities is ever since 2014, we've seen the growing influence, the growing involvement of the Russian military in cyber operations. There you see a picture of the former defense minister, Shoigu, with Putin, looking at I guess, a model of the new Technopolis, the elite of the Russian army. It's their high-tech campus in Napa. You see the entrance there in the lower right-hand corner. But take a look at some of the functions that we see the military performing. Of course, you'd expect them: force protection, offensive operations, whatever you can imagine part of war. But you then see propaganda, counter-propaganda, training. They're involved in everything. They're becoming more and more involved. So we have to see the military as a major player, probably at this point eclipsing the FSB. So let's talk a little bit about Ukraine. Perpetual harassment and testing. And remember, this war has been going on a long, long time. We in the West tend to regard the normal situation in the world as peace, regrettably now and then interrupted by a shooting war. That's very much not the Russian view of this. The Russians' view is much more war is perpetual. Sometimes it's a shooting war, sometimes it's something else, but it goes on forever. So this notion that the attack on the most recent attack on Ukraine in February of 22 was the beginning of it. Absolutely not. This war has been going on for some time. Certainly, at least as in the current era, back to 2014, when they illegally invaded and annexed Crimea and some parts of eastern Ukraine. This has been going on. And since then, you've also seen this perpetual harassment and testing on the cyber front. What did it do, though? It led to better Ukrainian preparedness. So let's talk a little bit about that. Here's an illustration of how important the Russians see the internet. Look at the timeline I have there. Before the fighting is even over, the annexation, illegal annexation, I would add, of the Crimean Peninsula happens on March 18th, 2014. Literally less than a week later, Medvedev is telling Rostelcom, the state-owned telecommunications company, you need to lay internet cable across the Kerch Strait. Because the Kerch Strait is a narrow body of water that separates Ukrainian Crimea from the Russian mainland. You see that in the little inset map on the right-hand side. Um, Before the fighting's over, the next day the military phase ends. But this is so important to Medvedev that they're already saying before this thing is even over, we've got to make this annexation work. We've got to lay internet cable directly from the Crimean Peninsula, the now Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula, with mainland Russia. Within a month, the cable is laid, and a few months later, the first signals cross. So this is clearly how important the Russians see this medium. So what does that mean? Well, if you take a look at this, when the Ukrainians controlled their own territory in Crimea, the internet connections went up in the Ukrainian mainland. Now they go across the Kerch Strait, and so they're going through. Basically, they're managed by Russian ISPs. They go through Russian IXPs. You see the three most likely locations at Rostov, Krasnodar, and Stavropol. What does that mean? Well, it also means that every bit of internet traffic that's coming out of Ukraine is going through the FSB's SORM system. This is a very sophisticated surveillance system. Every Russian ISP has to connect their system to run through the FSB's system. I think we're now on SORM 3. Basically, it's a monitoring system. So they're basically checking everything that comes in and out of Crimea. Here's another example of the kind of things that the Russians have been doing in Ukraine. Here you get kind of a combination between there's hacking, but there's also information warfare, disinformation. So this is during the presidential election in 2014, in May 2014. The Russian hacker group Sandworm, associated with the GRU, hacks into the Ukrainian Electoral Commission. Well, they do the usual, they destroy some files, but here's an interesting thing. They try to falsify the results. They block the reporting system so that kind of clogs up, do a DDoS attack. And so what did they do? They planted false information. So you look at that chart that I have in the lower right there. They found a candidate who came in 11th, and basically a dark horse, nobody candidate, the candidate Dmitry Yarosh. They wanted to play up the narrative that the fascist right wing, they call the Ukrainians Nazis and all of these sorts of things. That this Yarosh had an incredible result and emerged as the winner with 37% of the vote. He got less than 1% of the vote in reality and came in 11th. Winner, Petro Poroshenko. They said he only got 29%. In fact, he got nearly 55% and came in first. Now, here's an interesting fact. The Первый Канал, you see their logo on the lower left-hand side there, the first channel, Russian TV, the government-owned channel, reported on the Ukrainian election. And guess what numbers they used? The exact same numbers that Sandworm tried to put into the Ukrainian Electoral Commission's computers. Fortunately, the Ukrainian CERT got wise to this, worked very, very hard, cleaned the system out, got it out, and the correct results were actually what was reported to the public. Well, let's stick with our friends at Sandworm for a little bit. Very, very active. The next year, 2015, now we're trying to black out cities. 2015, black energy malware. The city of Ivano-Frankivsk, a major city in western Ukraine, plunged into darkness. A year later, the capital city of Kiev, same thing with a malware called Indestroyer. Wind Destroyer, as far as we know, is the first custom-made malware designed specifically to attack electric grids. And then the following year, 2017, everybody's heard about this one. One of Sandworm's major campaigns, NotPetya. Well, how did NotPetya happen? This cost billions of dollars to clean up. It affected literally scores of companies around the world. Now, what we don't know is, was this purposely done to wreak havoc? Was this purposely done to send a message of what we're able to do? Or did it escape into the wild by mistake, but it went worldwide? You see just some of the victims here. So how did they do it? Well, basically, there was a small family run software business that created this software called MEDoc. It's tax software. It's recommended by the Ukrainian tax authorities. And so 90% of Ukrainian firms, and that includes companies doing business in Ukraine, use this MEDoc tax software, obviously, so it makes it easier to report to the information that the government wants. So they basically managed to get into the MEDoc software. They infected an update. The update went out around the world. And launched this infection. It dropped a wiper. It was disguised as ransomware. So when you go in, you see there's something wrong. It looks like ransomware. You start going through the protocols of how do you respond to ransomware. And in fact, it turns out that it's really a wiper. It destroyed the records of so many companies. You look at Maersk there, the ship on the top there, I think the largest shipping company in the world. Imagine trying to keep track of all of those containers, not just on that ship, but on ships worldwide. The only way they were able to reconstitute this was one of their offices in Africa, I think it was in Senegal, had shut down their computer system for maintenance on that day. So they were able to rebuild everything from that. But this was just an absolutely devastating attack. Once again, Sandworm and the Russian GRU. So now let's start moving toward, we could go on and on about everything that happened between 2014 and 2022, but I hope that gives you a flavor of what's out there. Let's move on to, as we get toward the attack, the most recent attack in February of 2022. So the day before, February 23rd, 2022, of course, we've seen tanks and other military equipment massed on the border for several months. We're starting to see activity. It looks like there's going to be a kinetic movement. And what do we see? Well, we see something that's going to become one of the hallmarks of the most recent Russian war on Ukraine, wiper software, wiper malware. Just before the invasion in February of 22, we see hermetic wiper. There's going to be several wiper malwares that are going to be seen literally 12 hours before the Putin announcement of the invasion. So that night, the night before, basically, we see extensive infection of Ukrainian systems, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament, cabinet, their intelligence organization, and a lot of private organizations like banks. It basically, the way this wiper malware works is it corrupts the master boot record. So not only does it steal what you've got in there, not only does it block your system as a DDoS attack would do, it actually wipes everything clean. There's nothing left when you get to it. There's nothing there. Then we see this followed by other wiper malwares, and we'll see that coming back to improvement in a little bit. Cell phones have become a big deal. So if you were in the military that day before, your cell phone rings and you got a message. Your commanders have abandoned you. You need to put down your arms and go home to your family. It's all over. It's finished. Didn't work, but that was the attempt that was made. Civilians got a call was slightly different. It's over. You better go get your money out of the bank, trying to create a run on the banks. So let's proceed through the February invasion. Once again, I'd just like to call your attention to that. You remember that picture I showed you at the outset of the attack in Georgia. Unless you happen to see the odd blue and yellow Ukrainian flag there, or notice that the people in the picture are wearing cold weather clothing. The war on Georgia in 2008 took place in August in the summer. But other than that, the pictures look very much the same. The refugees pushing everything they have down the street, apartment buildings, schools, kindergartens, hospitals, all attacked. Looks very, very similar. This is basically the way the Russians conduct war, and I think we need to take that into account. Well, before I start talking about what's been going on since February of 22, just want to start with a note of caution. Beware of OPSEC and the fog of war. Not everything is published. So when you try to do this kind of analysis, you have to rely on what has been published, what's been said by the organizations. There's various companies. Some of them are Ukrainian companies. Some of them are West European companies. Some of them are American companies that put out this. Some of the governments put things out. The Ukrainian CERT puts things out. But you need to be keenly aware that you're not getting the full picture. You're only getting that part which somebody wants to release. And then the fog of war. In any war, certainly in a kinetic war, but this happens too in the cyber world. We may not even know what the ground truth is, and for several years, if ever, there's probably things that will always be distorted, always be unknown. We just don't know. So I'm a little skeptical when I see timelines and trends and what's happening. I'm a little skeptical. Do we know everything? Can we really put together a trend? I'm going to try and put together a description, but just be aware that that's out there, and it's a real limitation to being able to assess what's out there. Okay, this was these attacks that we're going to talk about right now. It was the early Russian cyber attacks were long planned for a long planned short war. So there's three messages in there. The cyber attacks were long planned. They've been working on them for some time, getting ready for something they had obviously already decided to do. This was a long planned war. This is also something they had already decided to do, and they assumed it was going to be a short war. So just like you saw in the kinetic world, we see the same thing in the cyber world. Sort of a, what do we do now? This was supposed to be over, and it's not over that quickly. So what happens on the day of February 24th, 2022? At 05:02 in the morning, literally at the same time as Putin is speaking on radio, announcing what's happening, the kinetic forces are moving, rolling across the border. There are missile strikes on Ukrainian territory. We see a cyber attack on the Viasat satellite system. And this was something that was widely used by the Ukrainian security services. It obviously doesn't just service Ukraine, so they also knocked out the capabilities in several countries. So what did they do? There's three main components to a system like this. There's the satellite up in space. Obviously, that's pretty hard to access. There's the dish, and then there's the modem. What makes it actually work is the modem in every office, every building where you're using this. So basically what they did was they used acid rain, once again, wiper malware, to update the modems. Well, what did they do? They didn't update the modems. They wiped them clean and basically made it impossible to use Viasat. This was very, very transparent. Very, very quickly, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union attributed the attack to Russia. Less than a week later, we see a very coordinated attack on a TV tower and on the computer systems of a television station. Clearly coordinated, I mean, exact timing. And a couple of days later, in Sumy, a telecoms blackout. You see where Sumy is there. It's obviously on the road to the invasion. Um, then things start to change. Here's In Destroyer 2. Remember, I said In Destroyer is the first known malware designed to attack electrical grids. Well, now we see In Destroyer 2. But guess what happens? Just like we see the tide turning on the kinetic side, we see all of a sudden the Ukrainian CERT gets wind of this and blocks it. The Ukrainians are fighting back. And the war dragged on, and they seem to be able to fight back pretty effectively. So how do they do this? Well, first of all, there's great cyber defense, there's foreign assistance, there's tech company support, and the move to the cloud. Unexpectedly better Ukraine. They learned their lesson in 2014 and basically organized to defend their country on the cyber front. The former director of the British GCHQ said this was probably the greatest cyber defense ever mounted in history. The United States gave a lot of help. Here you see General Nakasone, at that time the NSA director and Cybercom commander, interestingly, tellingly, symbolically speaking at a conference in Tallinn, Estonia, very openly saying, we've conducted a series of operations across the full spectrum. We're helping the Ukrainians. A lot of money poured into it. So you get that, and we're not the only ones. The British have been a big help. NATO has given the Ukrainians access to the cyber threat library. There's something called the Tallinn mechanism, which was started by Estonia and Luxembourg. I think it's grown to 18 countries now, put a lot of money, a lot of talent into helping the Ukrainians on cyber defense. And an interesting development, private companies in the West individually helping the Ukrainians. So you see Starlink helping with communications. I'll talk a little bit more about Amazon and the cloud and Microsoft Azure, ESET, an East European company, all jumping into all of this. Here's an example. Microsoft has gotten really good at this, and they did it again in the case of helping the Ukrainians. What they do is they go to an American court and they say, this is harming our business. And they lay it out. This is what's going on. In this case, they call strontium. It's also Fancy Bear or APT 28. They make their case. They get authorization from an American court to take them down. And then with the help of the U.S. Marshal Service, they basically take them down. So this starts happening, helping Ukraine. And then the move to the cloud. You see the gentleman in the lower right-hand corner, Mikhailo Fedorov. Mr. Fedorov is now First Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. There was a law in Ukraine that required any data on a Ukrainian citizen had to be stored in country. A lot of countries do that. He realized literally as the kinetic attack was imminent, if that happens, we are absolutely in big trouble, because one kinetic attack on a data center and we lose all our data. So with the help of Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, they quickly changed the law and literally just swept everything they could from the Ukrainian government servers into the cloud. Probably saved them a lot. You see down at the bottom there, 16 ministries, private companies, data from 27 ministries, 18 universities, their university and school systems, private companies. This was literally done in a matter of days. Well, on the Russian side, they didn't sit still, of course. So you see them starting to adapt. So we see in October 2022, we do see, after they were thwarted in April within Destroyer 2, they came back with another attack on an electricity plant, followed by a wiper attack. They did blank out a city for a small period. They start shifting their tactics, live off the land tactics, using stuff that's already in the victim's computer system rather than dropping in new malware. They didn't use In Destroyer again. As far as I know, it hasn't been used again. And they're starting to move from the IT systems, moving into the operational technology of these critical infrastructures. What didn't happen, and you hear some people saying, well, uh, they were kind of backing off these attacks. No, they weren't. They didn't back down. They doubled down. Look at the statistics from 2022, 23, 24. Big increases in attacks. Just a few examples. Ukrainian railways just last March. Just before the end of last year, a major attack on the state register. So they're doing some new things. They're adapting some things, but they're certainly not backing away from cyber operations against Ukraine. Well, what have we seen? Well, we've seen some of the old tricks that you'd expect. Ghostwriter is back. Ghostwriter was well known to the East European governments, to the German government, attack on the German Bundestag. Their technique is they steal credentials. So when they make a post, it really is a post from that organization. It's just that it's done without that organization's permission or individuals' permission, and they send out false letters. There was a letter from then NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg about withdrawing NATO support. Canadian troops are spreading COVID. There's lawlessness among the troops. They're basically trying to foment opposition to NATO involvement in the Eastern European countries. So what do we see here? They start becoming involved in Ukraine. This has became a famous one. Very, very soon into the attack in February, we see this. It's a deep fake. If you look carefully at it, it's not very convincing. But here's President Zelensky. I advise you to lay down your arms and return to your families. It was a fake. And another interesting little twist, Mandiant, one of the primary cyber defense, cyber research companies, seems to think that they found some links between Ghostwriter and the Belarusian KDB, the KDB. It's still called the Belarusian KGB, but interesting. It's another little string to pull on there to research what that may have been. And then, of course, you remember when I was talking about Georgia, talking a little bit about kids and criminals, criminals and kids. Well, we have, once again, hacker wars, groups like Hachnet, Killnet. And yes, we had a lot of questions. We had people literally, when we said what was going on in Georgia, people doing everything to try and say, no, you can't prove it. It's not the Russians. It's not the Russians. I had one computer researcher telling me it could have been teenagers in Vietnam. I said, yeah, it could have been teenagers in Vietnam, but it wasn't, and you know it. Well, here's an interesting quotation that a friend of ours dug out, talking about Hachnet. We work under strict government direction. Well, that's pretty direct. Our contacts with the military began after the start of our activities. We have a job. We're qualified IT specialists, and we get salaries from Putin. Friends, what else is there to say? So these are, once again, these groups of irregulars of varying levels of skill associated with this or that agency. In this case, it's obviously the GRU if they're talking about the military. And they have varying degrees of skill. They can know how to do things. They don't know how to do other things. They're clearly not the primary attack, but they also use them for going after things like overseas targets, where my guess is the Russians would like to have plausible deniability. This is just some things that I drew up from activities of the group called Killnet, the Romanian parliament, the Italian parliament, the Polish railroads. They even attacked the Eurovision Song Contest. And then here's another indication, another interesting little thing. a group that is believed to be connected to KillNet. And remember, these are a lot of very young people, so they groups splinter off, and you're not quite. It's quite kind of hard to keep track of them all. Basically, shopping their capability to the FSB. Hey, look what we did. We know how to penetrate a gas pipeline. We've done that against the Canadians. So they said we can change valve pressure, disable alarms, do emergency shutdowns. It's hard to tell whether they really did this. Something happened in Canada. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, did allude to the fact that there was something had happened. There was no damage. Certainly, they didn't do what they said they did. But the interesting fact here is that you've got this private group of young people basically hawking their services to the FSB. Very active in the current Ukrainian conflict. No Name 57. They are very active on their Telegram channel. They claim a lot of things. They may claim some things that didn't happen. They may claim some things that were actually done by those groups that are part of the Russian government. Some of it is just claimed. Some of it is confirmed. And once again, we see crowdsourcing. If you have got some computer skills and you want to help the motherland, here's some instructions. Here's a list of things, very much like we saw in Georgia in 2008. And now here's something I think we need to pay very close attention to. Forming hacker alliances with pro-Russian groups, pro-Palestine groups, anti-Western groups, and attacking around the world. Well, let's not forget about the big guys. APT-28 out there. All of a sudden, we're starting to pay more attention to what's going on outside of Ukraine. Hacked some 10,000 security cameras, mostly to do with logistics, watching what's coming across or toward the Ukrainian border, watching transshipment points. Seen this kind of activity in 13 countries, starting to push out kind of strategic thinking, strategic espionage. So the cyber war continues. Don't for a minute think that they're not doing the big hits. They are. Sandworm going after Kyivstar, the largest mobile operator in Ukraine. Ouroboros, otherwise known as Turlo Venomous Bear, is back. Their specialty is trying to intercept the communications coming out of embassies. You see a picture of the American embassy in Moscow there. And we see more improvements in wiper malware. It was bound to happen. Most recently, Cisco Talos reported on the development of something called Pathwiper, more sophisticated wiper malware. They're attributing it to a Russian APT, but not saying which one. And just recently, the Ukrainian CERT has said they've seen APT-28 with a large language model driven malware called that they've called Lame Hug, using basically for automated commands, speeding up a hack with artificial intelligence. One of the most important things that we've seen here is that the Russian hackers have moved closer to the battlefield. A lot of the things I told you about probably were to be expected. Interestingly, becoming much more involved in the hour to hour, even minute to minute, stealing information, providing the information, and using it for targeting. Just one example that came out, tragic, November 23, apparently due to the hack of a soldier's Signal account, knew that there was a Ukrainian troop gathering. I think it was an awards ceremony, and the Russian missile, basically in almost real time, was able to target this with this kind of information. Here's another example, using Signal, which is widely used by the Ukrainian military. So there's a fire control system called Kropiva. It's they put a lure. Basically, it's an icon that looks very much like the Kropiva application. If you click on it by mistake, it links your device to another Signal device. So now you and your command structure and your subordinate units are all talking on this Kropiva fire control system, and a third party in the Russian army is also seeing what's going on. So this is a big development. I think we need to pay attention to this. I've put this here. Closer coordination between Russian hackers and frontline troops is a major development in organization, intelligence, culture, and technology. So I know I've given you a lot, and maybe some of it was hard to follow. I hope not, but here's my key takeaways from everything I've told you. The Russian cyber doctrine is long and well considered, and it is now effectively adapting to Ukrainian resistance and the wartime ops tempo. Wiper malware is prevalent and it's improving. And we've seen the growing role of the military in cyber, and obviously that date not only dates back to 2014, obviously in the current war, since they're at front and center of things, they've got even more influence. And we see big attacks on critical infrastructure that's still going on, moving closer to the battlefield. That's a major development that I think we need to pay attention to. Cell phones and tablets have become key devices in cyber war. This use of hacker groups continues apace, clearly using, as I put it in the beginning, criminals and kids, kids and criminals. Some of them will probably mutate and be absorbed into those more bureaucratized, more professional groups that once probably started out that way and are now pretty much part of the Russian system. There's increasing attacks on the perceived international supporters of Ukraine, and we should beware of system mapping and prepositioned malware. Remember what I said at the outset. The Russians see war as a continuous process. So if they're in an American system, if they're in a British system, if they're in a German system, you should assume that they are laying back doors, maybe even logic bombs, whatever, for future use, if and when that day ever comes. And we have seen the use of AI to make attacks more efficient and quicker. So with that, if you do have any questions or comments or thoughts, I'd be very pleased to entertain them. Over to you. And thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, the only question we have so far was from 34 minutes ago. Was Sergey the one who got assassinated just a bit ago?
I'm sorry. I'm not getting the question. Sergey.
Yeah, he asked about if Sergey was the one who was assassinated just a while ago.
I'd ask that question, or maybe just to I'm not quite sure which Sergey we're talking about, and
Yes, neither am I. If I think the name is Patrick. If you're able to add a little bit more into another Q&A question, I can read from that one.
Any other questions?
Perfect. Patrick mentioned the former defense minister you mentioned early on in the presentation. Was it that Sergey?
No, as far as I know, Shoigu's still alive.
David asked, any thoughts or good sources on learned lessons so far regarding cyber deterrence on the part of U.S. and allies?
Any thoughts on sources?
Sources, or good sources on lessons learned.
Well, I don't know that anybody's really done the lessons learned yet. There's a lot of good work that's being done by ESET, by Mandiant. I mentioned Cisco Talos. So, I mean, I think the best way to keep abreast of this stuff right now is to read these reports that are coming out of those companies, read things that are coming out of the CCCDOE in Tallinn, the Cyber Center of Excellence, the NATO Cyber Center of Excellence in Tallinn, Estonia. I think those are your best sources right now. to see what's going on. The other thing that has been happening, which is actually I think good news, is there's been a series of memos that have come out jointly from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, several allies, which means it's gone through a process and it's probably fairly accurate if all those countries can agree on it. But as far as I think it might be a little too early to go much farther than I've gone on lessons learned. But that's how I would that I mean that's what I do to try and keep up with it is I try and read all of those things. And some of the Washington think tanks put out some good stuff too.
Wonderful. And just as a reminder for everyone to please use the Q&A feature rather than raising hands. We can get to it quicker that way. The next question I have is, can you think of a way to regulate AI to limit its use in cyber warfare?
No. I mean, um, the problem is Western minds immediately turn to sort of legal solutions. Can we write a treaty, or something like that? And that may work in certain instances where you're talking about corporations using it, whatnot. But I've got some sad news for people. Governments like the Russian government and the Chinese government are going to do whatever they think they need to do. And no treaty, no agreement is going to keep them from doing it. That's been the track record. We went through, I spent a career in arms control. There was a time when the Soviet Union was in violation of every single arms control agreement it had ever signed. Um, it's so I'm not optimistic. I think we need to start thinking about what is possible with AI and assume they're doing it. Now, I know that's very pessimistic, and some people are rolling their eyes and saying, "Wow, this guy's got a problem." But I mean, that's been my sense, my experience is the countries that are really enemies of the United States, and so let's North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, they are not going to be bound by any agreements that we reach.
Wonderful. Our next question, is there any noticeable change in targeting by Russian cyber attacks, i.e. more on critical infrastructure or other sectors?
They seem to be moving toward more espionage and battlefield useful information, um, and away from well, I shouldn't say away, but um, maybe instead of some of the just sort of malicious, let's see if we can wreak havoc type of stuff. But then as soon as you say that, and this is why I gave that caution at the outset about OPSEC and the fog of war, we don't fully know what's going on. As soon as you say that they're moving away from something, bam, they hit with something else. So I think we ought to start thinking about in addition to rather than instead of. They seem to be concentrating on battlefield useful information and espionage, but I wouldn't say that is because they're moving away from big attacks on critical infrastructure. I think we should assume that that's still there too.
Wonderful. Our next question is, have you seen any examples of US or other NATO allied countries taking the lessons learned from this conflict and applying it to their own cyber warfare doctrine?
I have not, and I would not. That's not a world that I really have access to, and so anything I say would be pure conjecture. I really don't know the answer to that.
Okay. The next question is from Jason. Do we know if Russia has attempted or has performed cyber attacks on Ukrainian allies to slow down aid given to Ukraine?
Uh, there's clearly an information campaign going on throughout Europe, the countries that are supporting Ukraine. There's a lot of this, I mentioned Ghostwriter, these sort of false information memos circulating. Um, that sort of thing. They're clearly watching what's going on in the kinetic world. They're, as I mentioned, those cameras. They're clearly concerned about what may be rolling into Ukraine. Have they taken any steps? Well, there's been DDoS attacks. Um, on some of the European countries. So yes, but no major strikes yet that I am aware of. And remember what I said about OPSEC and fog of war that I'm aware of.
Wonderful. One of our next questions, Katrina said, "Thank you so much. I'm from the Baltics. What kind of future do you see for us? Russia is using the exact same tactics on us at the moment."
Uh, well, look, we all and the Baltic countries are kind of the leaders in this because they're right there on the front line and understand exactly what's at stake here with this attack on Ukraine. Um, I think we all need to stick together and understand what the Russian threat is. And so I can't predict the future, but I can tell you one thing: we will certainly have a problem if we start fighting amongst ourselves and dividing ourselves up. We need to recognize what the Russian threat is, and that means that's political, that's kinetic, that's cyber, that's everything, and we need to act accordingly. And I don't know which of the Baltic countries you're from, Katrina, but I think the Baltic countries for being, considering their size, incredibly large leaders in this respect.
Thank you. One of our next question is, what level is China invested in helping Russia in this area?
Hard to tell. They're clearly being, as they are on the political level and the kinetic level, they're clearly being very cautious. You don't see a wholesale Chinese assistance in the cyber world to the Russians. Unlike the kinetic world, though, it's not clear that the Russians need much cyber help from the Chinese, but I think they're being very, very cautious, so that they clearly don't want to get caught up in this thing. There have been some instances even of mutual spying, cyber spying between Russia and China. So, that's a very complicated relationship there. But oh, I'm sorry. Uh, um, no, but I don't think there's been a major push to sort of reinforce on the cyber world.
Okay, and we have one more question, as time permits. In addition to the use of smartphones and iPads, how safe are durable medical devices, computer brain interface for persons with disabilities, and wearables from this type of infiltration by foreign actors?
They're very vulnerable. It's something that, I mean, it's hard to imagine, but yeah, your pacemakers, and I'm certainly no expert on the subject, but yeah, anything that's got a connection is vulnerable. So it's something, as we make um, more advances in the medical device field, and to the extent that these things are basically have an external connection, you need to worry about some kind of hacking going on. Now, as far as like things like chips in the brain and whatnot, I would say the same thing. Now, once again, as I said, I'm certainly no expert, but anybody designing those things needs to think about that. There are people out there, and they're not all, associated with nation states that are hostile to the United States. There are hacker groups out there There are crazies out there, frankly, who are interested in mucking around with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think they're very vulnerable, and so I think we need to start designing those things and a lot of other things with security in mind, security by design rather than security by a fix later when something emerges to be a problem. We need to start anticipating what could be done and try to build security into those systems.
Okay, I would like to thank Ambassador Smith, our sponsors, and all of you who joined us today. For those interested in learning more about our courses and applying to study at IWP, please speak with a member of our staff by going to iwp.edu and visiting us online. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador.
Lana, thank you, and thank you all for attending this thing. I appreciate it very much.
Of course. Have a great night, everyone.